January 21st, 1991. I was in my office at the time, and a policewoman came into my office and said, "I'm sorry, you're going to have to leave. The church is on fire." We all went outside and stood there and watched the church burn down. And I have to admit, after 20-some years of perspective, I can say it was a spectacular fire. The very next day, we had a service up the street at First United Methodist Church. During the fire and all of that, I really, it was shock and sadness and all of that, but I really didn't get emotional. The first time that I got emotional is when we went down to the Methodist Church and had this marquee out front, and it said, "Welcome," excuse me, it said, "Welcome, Holy Trinity Church." The city of Gainesville was wonderful in cooperating with us, and they allowed us to hold one more service then. One of our people was leaving the service, and they were stopped by a television person to interview as they were leaving. And the reporter asked them about what it meant to lose the church. And I can't remember who this parishioner was. It's probably recorded somewhere. Maybe it's in Georgia's history. Looked at the reporter, kind of surprised, and said, pointed to the ruins behind her and said, "Well, this isn't the church." And then pointed to all the people coming out and said, "This is the church. The people are the church." So we first had a planning committee, not a building committee, but a planning committee, because there were some issues we had to address before we actually got to planning a rebuild. We told them that we couldn't make a replica of the old church, nor did we want to. It was too small. People were very supportive in the rebuilding, not only with their love and their care, but also financially. And I remember getting a card from a little girl. I think it had, I can't remember the exact amount, I think it had 87 cents in it. And she had drawn a picture on that card of the church in crayon or something like that. But it's very simple. It said something like, "Dear God, please use this money to rebuild your house." And it really brought us closer together. And oddly enough, people still found us. Even though we were worshiping in different places, people still found us, and the church continued to grow during those 4 years.
I saw the church burn. I was on the downtown plaza. It was because it was Martin Luther King Day, and there was an event there to commemorate that. And so I saw the smoke coming up, but I was not part of the church then, so it was not particularly meaningful to me. Well, I'm involved in everything, really. I came from a background of community activism, and so, it was a community activism that had, a certain ideology, but, I was not always happy with the way we treated each other. So I came down to visit Gainesville, and I really liked it here. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to be in a place where it clicks and you go, "Oh, this is the place for me." I liked the weather, I liked the culture, I liked the lands, the plants and everything. And I liked the fact that people didn't have to work so hard and they could have free time, which no one in New York has free time.
First time I walked into Holy Trinity, I felt at home. I just wish I had the vocabulary to express the feelings that I got. It was just like coming home. It was something very familiar because everything else in my life was so new at that time, and I loved it. I just felt totally at home. I will never forget the feeling of parking the car and walking to the curb on 2nd Avenue, 1st Avenue, and standing back and watching the flames come out through the stained glass windows. And the stained glass windows were just curling over it was as if they were made out of plastic or rubber, and they were just curling over, and you knew that the church was not going to survive, that it was a devastating fire. And I remember standing on the curb, and my reaction was not one of, I didn't cry, I just felt challenged. I just felt this will not get us down. We will build again. Darn it, God, you can't do this to us. This just isn't fair, but we're gonna rise again. And by the time we got the church itself rebuilt, then we could give full attention to starting the Interfaith Hospitality Network. And I remember going to the vestry. I said to David, I cannot go to other churches and ask them to be a host church unless we are a host church.
Right.
The main thing I would say of the hospitality, the Interfaith Hospitality Network, was to be able to go from within the church into the community.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I love the downtown ministry now, because we are not just ministering to ourselves. That's important, to minister to your community, but you don't want to get so inbred that you forget there's a world out there. So I like the idea that we're doing things that involves us in the community, and that we are helping people. You know, that's the whole purpose of Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
is to help each other. And so that, to me, fulfills us as true Christians, to be able to do that.
I mean, right now I have a pretty demanding job, but I get really invigorated by trying to be coherent in what we say we believe and how we live it. How to live the things that we say we believe. And I think there are many, many ways that I can continue to do that through ministry and leadership in the church. You know, to have a humble heart, to be optimistic. And so all those Olays who always say, bless his heart, as opposed to saying, oh, there's something else that's much less friendly and spiritual. I want to be able to do that with feeling.
Holy Trinity is the old backbone of the community type church. And our mission is very clear. And I'm sure we're going to stay with this mission forever, as long as we're in existence.
What would the mission be?
That mission would be to serve the needy,
Okay.
both children and adults, families.
Okay. Has the church always had that mission?
Well, it was a decision of the vestry at one point, but it was also a gradual transition. We saw the need. There was more and more people to need in the downtown area. Nobody else was doing it. The Presbyterians were fairly close. But it was sort of a natural for us to get into it, and we wanted to. And so we devote a good part of our budget and our activities to helping those in need in the downtown area.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was lots of support for that.
Oh yes, absolutely. It still is.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. How do you think Gainesville perceives of Holy Trinity as far as then and now?
I don't know. I don't know how Gainesville perceives us. I know that we're needed.
Okay.
And we're providing, and we had a choice. When the church burned, we had a choice to buy some land in the Northwest where most of our congregation lives.
Okay.
It would have been a natural thing to build a new church in the Northwest. And so this was a purposeful move to stay here and serve this area that's needed, although our people that come here and go to church don't live in the area at all. We all drive in from out of town, from out of out of the outskirts of the urban area.
Okay.
The church rebuild committee decided that we would like to incorporate some of the original burnt stones from the wreck, from the debris,
Okay.
into the new building. We thought that would be sort of to honor the old building, and so we got a load of the old burnt stones. You see those facade stones out there; they're very beautiful,
Yes.
and delivered them down at my company in the yard. And then on weekends, the committee would go down there with Father Pittman, and we would clean and scrape and grind the black off, and try not to scar them. And then we would preserve as many as we could in as best shape as we could. Now some of them were really damaged, and we couldn't save them. But anyway, we got a pretty good pile. One time, Father Pittman was on top of the stone pile, and he fell and broke his arm. And that set us back a little bit, but we kept going. And we built a nice little pile of repaired stones. And then we brought them up here, and they were incorporated in the building. And I tell you, I've looked, and I cannot find any of them, but I know they're there. And in my heart, I know they're there. So anyway, that's just a little story that the way we were emotionally involved with the building.
I heard that one of the original stained glass is still.
That's right. We were very, very lucky. I'm glad you mentioned that, because the main window in the south side of the east side of the church was called the rose window. It's called the rose window, and we had it out for repairs. When this crazy man came through town, he burned 32 churches in the South.
Okay.
He didn't care whether they were white churches or black churches or what denomination. He was crazy. And in his mind, he got some sort of a cleanliness from burning down a church. But anyway, that was one of the wonderful things that happened, that church window was preserved, and it's there now. Yeah.
My wife and I have been members at Holy Trinity since January of 1964. What drew me to Holy Trinity was the then rector, which was Earl Page. And I happened to go one time and heard him preach, and I liked him and got to know him, and the rest is history. I have been on several vestries. I've been senior warden several times. I am a vice chancellor of the diocese. Now, the chancellor is the head attorney, in effect. If the bishop needs some legal assistance in Gainesville or some surrounding area, he would call upon me for that help. My office then was on the same street where the church is. And I'm sitting in my office one day, and one of my partners came in. She said, "I think your church is burning." I got in, I raced down there, and it was in fact burning. There were a bunch of ladies there who were besides themselves. And I've told this story before, so they've all heard it, but I'm sitting there thinking, well, we really needed it bigger, so now here's the opportunity to do that. It was started by an arsonist, a gentleman who had been in some sort of mental institution up in Tennessee and escaped. We now know two things. One, his father had alerted the state that his son was on his way to Florida, and that it was very possible that that he would be doing something like he did, which is burn churches, because ours was not the only church that was burned. Now, the second thing we learned is that he was there watching it burn. part of what came out of that was that we sat around. I mean, we actually had, gatherings in people's homes to decide what are we going to do? Are we going to remain a downtown church? We felt like we had a ministry down there to the homeless. Oh no, we came out much stronger after the fire, much stronger.
Well, our church is, has some diversity around class and color and stuff, but it doesn't, it's a traditional Protestant church. Most of the people are white, middle class people, but, there is diversity, but, so I'm really proud of them for staying there, staying downtown. It would be much more comfortable, much less challenging to have moved out to the northwest, which is where most of the people in the church live, after the church burnt down. But they made a commitment to stay downtown, which is a commitment to being uncomfortable, to dealing with, poor people who come to streetside breakfast and, people sleeping in the alcove and, and having a presence in the downtown for things like when Terry Jones and, to sort of collaborate with other churches in Gainesville that are taking that kind of a stand.
Earl was, as I said, he's basically a leader. Mm-hmm. And he had leader capacities. That is that for me, he built trust with people, not in any kind of manipulative way, but sort of a natural way. Mm-hmm. People who disagreed with him, and through classes and sermons, he was able to kind of open the world for him.
So how did, you had his passing and now the church is burned down. How did you deal with that?
Well, this congregation is really amazing. Mm-hmm. And we had a good rector, David Pittman, and actually I was at a conference up in North Carolina, a church conference, and they called me, my friend Mary called me, said that the church is burned down. Oh my heavens. So all I could think about was we had the daycare center here. Well, she smelled something. She went outside and saw some flames coming. So she got all the children out and got them over to the other center. And, they just, it was hard for people. The church is more than just leaders or the particular structure. A structure. It's a sense of community, and that community has been very strong the whole time I've been here, since 1960. So I was able to just appreciate that we could get a new church. It's not, I don't think, quite as pretty as the other one, but it's very similar, and it's larger.
Also, the school, I know that the church itself was able to rebuild, but the school... They restructured everything down here, so they decided they would just have the one school on 16th Avenue. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, they're going to have a whole program. They bought property, and there's going to be, instead of being, we named it the Holy Trinity, quote, Child Caring Center, it will be Holy Trinity, I think, school. And it will start, I think it will have preschool, and I don't know how far up they will start gradually adding. And they bought land across the street where the Savannah Grand was, and that's where the school will be. One of the gifts that the church has been for me is that I had a real community of family, like a family. They were very supportive of me, and so I was blessed.
I have a lot of energy for making things happen, and from my years as an activist and just as a pushy New Yorker, and so. There's always places for people to step in and make things different or better. Not every idea I have is something that gets warmly embraced, but yes, I have felt so welcomed, and so, at this point I have to say no to things because I just can't do, I'm still making a living. There's a lot of people there who are retired and the church is run by this army of 80-year-olds. You know, I don't know what we would do without the, like, you know, the 80-year-old women in the church who are like running everything. I feel so grateful to so many of the people there who have a kind of wisdom and a kind of aliveness and alertness in their spiritual practice. I mean, there are people there who have been practicing Episcopalians for longer than I have been alive, and they're still working it. I would like to see a vision in which we're working more with rather than for, you know, so to get some of the people who come to Streetside Breakfast to work with us. That's something I would really like to see happen. Well, I hope that we continue to grow, and especially to expand the kind of diversity in the church, which I think is one of our great riches in this church, is that it's not out in the suburbs and, you know, just one kind of folks come. I think there's a whole bunch of folks, you know, and to sort of help walk people through, you know, what do I do when a homeless person sits down next to me in church? And, you know, and to see that person not just as homeless, but this is, you know, Patrick, or it's, you know, Mary, or whoever it is that we see all the time.
My wife was a Methodist, and you know, we met at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, and she got a job down here at the University of Florida, and so I followed her down here, you know, we kind of spent a little time. Well, I guess I should kind of backtrack a little bit, because we were not married when we came down here. Or she came down here. I came down in the summer of 1991, and we kind of scoped out churches to get married at. And we went to the Episcopal Church, Holy Trinity Episcopal Church there. You know, my wife had been an organ major in college at one point, and she was looking for a big organ. And you know, quite frankly, the organ at that time at Holy Trinity, this was 1992, or 1991, as I said, it wasn't all that impressive. So we wound up getting married at the Methodist church just down the street, just because the organ was better. And as luck would have it, I mean, that was the weekend that Trinity Episcopal burned down. And then we went to Amelia Island for our honeymoon, is where we read about the church burning down. And of course that was happening all over. There were all kinds of well, I guess it was one person, but all kinds of churches burning, being burned right around that area. I mean, a number of churches right on this street, 34th Street, were burned, and in Jacksonville and all throughout the Southeast. But then, yeah, we started attending after that, you know, just it felt good to be part of this rebuilding kind of effort. And I think it goes to show, I mean, the church is about the people, you know, not about the space, really. You come down to it. Kind of you know, it was quite frankly a nice building, but it was kind of dark inside, and it just, you know, we really like what the new parish looked like after it was completed. So I mean, I don't know that it was negative. Maybe it was positive in that it kind of generated a sort of, you know, camaraderie and coming together, and in a sense it's part of what probably attracted us, because we came in right after you know, the fire happened, during that rebuilding effort. So we really kind of, I guess, had that as our first impression of the actual congregation. You know, the thing about a church is, such as Holy Trinity, is that it's been around for a long time. You know, it goes back to the 1800s here, and I think it was the first church in Gainesville that was really established here, if I'm not mistaken. And it's nice to think of it continuing to have a presence, you know, in lives down the road. And that's kind of the way I think of the procession. You know, it's like a big long train that goes way back, you know, to ancient times, and will process out, you know, into the future forever, you know. So when we're part of that, And I think we get to experience being a part of that long procession every time we go and participate in the worship there. So I hope it continues for a long time.
Both negatively in that we have to travel further, some people, and some people just don't want to come down, and parking can be an issue and things like that. That's the negative side, I think.
The positive side, I think, one of the positive sides, I think, is the fact it gives us an opportunity to have a downtown ministry. And we do. We have a group of people that meet twice a week and help the homeless get the information they need, registrations and identifications and all kinds of things to help them get home, or buy them a bus ticket to go home, or whatever. Well, I think it was a good thing because it brought other things. We were able to bring, we had a committee in the church who we brought in some very well-known speakers. We brought in artists, we brought in all kinds of things because Earl was very into that. He was a priest that appreciated all of that. And I think it gave the children something wonderful to remember for the rest of their lives. And I think it gave the kids and the adults a good feeling of the Bible stories coming to life. And I think that was probably a very good thing. And it was a wonderful community thing because everybody supported it.
I guess what I hope is that people around will feel they are accepted for who they are. And I think there has been a history, and I hope it continues. It goes way back to racial desegregation, when Earl Page, one of our people who works in the Black community, says he's still remembered now to this day for working to bring groups together back like in the 60s. And, that we've had gay members for a long time, and that's not necessarily the big thing for all Episcopal churches to do, or any church, and the homeless, we have a couple who walk into the service, or
definitely walk into the service, walk right up front and sit down.
and then through the Child Caring Center, because I taught there for years too, that children of whoever can come in, and that we're going to love them, and I think our work with the homeless and the IHN and all that again says
that we are definitely an outreach church. That's what we do.
In my life, I just started to wonder what else one could do with one's life other than work and pay the rent and and that's all. And I thought, they're going to write on my grave, she never was late for work. It's one that the music is wonderful, the ministries are wonderful, but, to not have those become an end in themselves, but a way of serving God in others. Not just, okay, these people need IDs, and so we're going to help them get ideas, but to see them as also children of God that could teach us something.
I'm the Director of Children and Youth Programming here at Holy Trinity. Essentially, I'm responsible for setting up programs and the spiritual development of our infant through high schoolers. Well, certainly it was a shock that an arson would do something like that to a beautiful church and destroy the church home that people have here. But I definitely think that there were some silver linings that came from the experience. When I was in school at UF, I remember being here and coming downtown and seeing the church rebuilt, not realizing later in life that it would become my church home. And so that was interesting when I heard about the fire and remembering the rebuild that I actually witnessed part of that. There was also a wonderful bond that was made between the Holy Trinity and First United Methodist Church, which is down the way a couple blocks, where we were able to worship during the time of the rebuild. And I have to say, we have maintained that wonderful relationship to this day. I remember noticing the church and not knowing what had happened. I mean, we saw this broken down church. I can't say, I think the charred parts had been replaced at that point, so it was not obvious that a fire had been taken place, but it was definitely that they had, that they were rebuilding. There was a lot of construction equipment. They had, had to close the roads off a little bit. Just a presence of a lot of construction going on, and and it piqued my interest. I had wondered at the time what had happened. It was clear that the church had been here, but it wasn't like a new church was being built. So there was clearly like an incident or something that had happened, and I just remember wondering about that. And it was neat to then come back at 2006 and learn that history and realize, that we had been here during the rebuild. I did hear about the debate. We are very much a downtown church. We have a vibrant downtown ministry to our homeless population here in Gainesville. We provide services that are the ID services and the birth certificate, street side breakfast, IHN, all of these different programs that a lot of churches don't have such a presence for our homeless population. And I think for our parishioners, it was very, very important to be able to continue to provide those. This is our identity, being a downtown church. And that said, we have people that come from the local community. We have people that drive in from High Springs and Alachua. We have a very diverse and vibrant parish. And I think that comes from being downtown. Could there have been some benefits from moving further west? Probably. And, it would have changed the nature of our church. I wouldn't say for the better, but just differently. But I think when the parish voted as a whole, they decided they wanted to remain the downtown parish. And so as far as the majority of the people at the time, that was the calling of the church, and so they decided to stay. We have families that have been here for generations, and it's just a testament to the long-lasting nature of Holy Trinity.
Executive Director of the Holy Trinity Foundation. Mm-hmm. The Holy Trinity Foundation has been around since the late 60s as a financial support for the church. All churches and most nonprofits go through ups and downs in funding, and the hope is that with this foundation as kind of a financial backstop, that we can even out those issues and never go through boom and bust cycles with the church budget. Every now and then we're able to do more extraordinary things with the foundation, but primarily that's what it's there for, to provide an evening influence and a financial backstop for the parish. A number of years, capital campaigns in many nonprofits and churches, usually you try to have a capital campaign maybe every 7 years or so, maybe 10 years. It had been about 20 years since we had one here. And that was really too long. We had a number of big projects that people had talked about for many years that just aren't the sort of things you can handle out of a normal annual budget. And as those things kind of percolated over the years, it became obvious we needed to do some things, such as, to backtrack a minute, we've had a preschool here in the church for probably 30 years. The idea was that could really excel if it had a little more space to grow. And the foundation had acquired a few years ago a building down the street that we decided, if we were able to raise enough money, we could turn that building around into a really first-class day school operation. And that was one of the driving influences behind the capital campaign. And we raised very significant money to do that with. Our parishioners were very generous, and between that and several other projects, we've raised enough money to do a lot of major work to the church and to the school, and to make a lot of really great things happen, we believe. Yeah, we're going, you mean within the capital campaign?
Yes.
Right. We hope to, for instance, we have a large pipe organ here in the church. And I didn't know this until a few years ago when we started talking about the capital campaign. There are a lot of things you can do with pipe organs. It's not as if you just come in and install the instrument and that's how it is for the next 50 years. There are always things you can add on to it, apparently, to make it easier to play. Apparently this is a very difficult instrument to play, and there's some things you can do to make it less strenuous on the person playing it. You can add other sounds to it and that sort of thing. So that's one of the areas that we raised money for. We installed a new heating and air conditioning system on the campus of the church here, with the understanding that that would be paid for through the capital campaign, and it was. And that was a very expensive endeavor, and it was necessary. We had the system that was here had been here since the church was rebuilt, and it was time for a new system, but those are excessive expenditures, and we needed something extraordinary like a capital campaign to pay for that. Same thing with the sound system. We had installed a new sound system not long ago because when the church was built, it's a wonderful room, but it really had some downfalls in spoken word, the way the sound system was installed. We installed a new system that makes it much, much better. Everyone who is hooked into the sound system, who has a microphone on, can be heard throughout the room now, and it's a very clear, usable system. Again, that was expensive and needed to be paid for out of the capital campaign.
I started going when I was in high school.
And why?
With a friend.
Okay, how did that happen?
We started going to her church and my church and switching back and forth, and we just liked her church, which was Holy Trinity, better.
Mm-hmm.
So we started going there.
And how involved were you during that time?
Not very.
Okay. But there was an active youth group during that time?
There was an active youth group, because I do remember a couple of being with the youth group a couple of times, just, like Sunday evenings or something. But I don't really remember too much about it, so.
Okay. So what was your reaction? How did people take the burning? Like, I don't think anybody expected it.
No, everybody knew that was because the church building was wooden.
Right.
That it was, that there was a risk something like that could happen, but of course nobody expected it.
Mm-hmm. And what about the rebuilding process? How was that?
Well, the first thing the church had to do, and there was some discussion about it, was to decide whether to rebuild downtown or move.
Mm-hmm.
Because when Holy Trinity was built, everything was downtown. I mean, Gainesville was very small, and, everything was within probably 10 blocks of downtown.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first decision, and then people did want to stay downtown. So then they just decided, to hire an architect and kind of wanted to go back with a building that was similar to the one that was there.
Did you guys rebuild with wood or?
It's well, the exterior was the same thing that it is now. It looks like stone, but it's actually concrete block.
Oh.
When you look at it, when you see it, there's a name for it which I don't remember.
Okay.
But anyway, that's what the original church was built out of too.
Okay.
In fact, have you been down there? There's a walkway. There's a kind of an enclosed garden, and there's a little wall that walls it off with. Those stones that are in that walkway are from the old church.
Oh, okay, so you guys were able to retain at least some of the...
Yeah, because they said because they were concrete blocks and they'd been through the fire, they were structurally damaged, so you couldn't use them to build another building
right.
with. But you could build a wall with them, so they did do that.
During the process of rebuilding, and there's no main church building, how were you guys able to maintain your outreach programs?
Well, we can't say never. The part that burned was the sanctuary part of the church, not and there was actually a building behind the church that was the parish hall. Mm-hmm. And I've been told, the joke for years before that was that the parish hall was so inadequate that if people said, if we could only figure a way to burn down the parish hall without taking the church with it,
right.
We would do it and build it up again. So, and then I was told that there were a whole group of people just standing out there watching the fire, and somebody from the fire department came out and said, well, the church is gone, but we were able to save the building behind it, and somebody in the crowd yelled, let it burn.
So your time at Holy Trinity, how would you describe it? Or as a person, or like being a member of that church, how do you think it impacted your life?
Well, obviously, I think it's been good for me, or I wouldn't have stayed. So,
right.
You know, I think it's been a positive influence on my life. Yeah.
So we're more spiritual now than, and more overtly and less embarrassed about it. You know, it used to be the place where you'd go to like rub elbows to like make business contacts. But I think that we have embraced, you know, a traditional spiritual practice and also some new spiritual practices. So and the vestry and everybody supports all of that. So I think that's really healthy, because people come looking for something. They come looking for community. They come looking for a spiritual practice and a spiritual experience. And so I think that we're realizing that.
I am the historiographer, which is a position that was kind of created. We've had many histories written of the church, but we've never had an archives before. When you have that situation where everything kind of disappeared in terms of your history, then it kind of becomes important to start really looking after what we have. And so we've gradually put together a collection of pictures and documents that are in those boxes and in this filing cabinet. People keep donating wonderful things, and I'm trying to keep it organized and make use of it for a variety of purposes. We have directories. As I said, we have 5 different histories that have been written, so I have several copies of those. Documents from the various organizations in the church, lots and lots of pictures, things like that. Well, the church is really the people. You know, the building is incidental, and yet it isn't. You have to have a place to gather, and they were such a church within themselves, if you know what I'm saying, that they saw to it that this church, physical church, was rebuilt. We have had wonderfully strong lay leadership in this church. It's really, when you read the histories, that stands out. The other thing is women. The women of this church prod their husbands and get them to do all kinds of things. The various women's organizations, and through the years, the names have changed. You know, first it was a women's auxiliary, and then it's the women's this, women's that. Now we have circles, and they're just a phenomenal bunch of women who will do anything: give dinners, create artwork, put on bazaars, and prod their husbands. There's no doubt about that. So this is quite a community of very dedicated people. Every single one of the historians has mentioned the importance of the music program, the involvement with education or with some sort of outreach to the community, and really strong fellowship and dedication to the parish by the lay people, as well as strong rectors.
You know, the role of the priests in the Episcopal Church is to support all the members of the church in their ministry. So I think one of the big challenges for them is to do that, to both give us the tools, the spiritual tools that we need to do that, the encouragement to do that, to sort of identify different talents that people have and different gifts, and to encourage, give us a way to live those out, and then to get out of the way.
In this church, you don't have to, and in most Episcopal churches, you don't have to believe the same thing to get along. I mean, we respect the gray area, meaning sometimes there isn't a right and wrong, that life might be about living in the ambiguity with one another in love. When I first arrived, we had, being downtown, we had kind of a steady stream of of the homeless and underemployed coming to the priest's office, both priests, and, asking for money for, medical help, bus tickets, just pastoral care. I mean, just all kinds of issues, mostly social needs. It was frustrating because this being a very large parish, I would have appointments, booked out pretty much throughout the day, and then somebody would come in and just wait for me for an hour or two, and I couldn't hear their story. I couldn't help them in 5-10 minutes. I was writing checks and throwing money at them. And I thought, that's not what they want. They need somebody to hear their story. How do we minister to people coming to see us needing help? And I said, one of the scriptures that stuck in my mind while I was praying about this ministry was, if you give a cup of cold water to the least of these, you've done it for me. So what I asked is that we have little bags. So if we couldn't solve a problem, couldn't help somebody out, they at least leave with a clean bottle of water, a pack of nabs, and, a bus ticket to get them around in the city where they need to be. So we call it the Downtown Ministry now, and we just serve hundreds and hundreds of people each year. I'd like to reach out to the unchurched people and help them to know what real community is and experience the love of Christ through our hands. It's a big need a lot of people have to feel fulfilled. I think we all, have a sense of longing to do something to help others and to reach out to others, to do something good with our lives.
Yeah.
And we have that. These people amaze me. The amount of work they do and the love that they show in doing it. They'll go to the last mile for you here. And I'm very proud of them. Very proud. And proud to be their rector.
What do you think has been the most important message that you guys have been sending the Holy Trinity?
That God loves you, and that we love you, and that you're welcome no matter what your beliefs are, what your gender preferences, no matter. I mean, we take everybody as they come, and we'll make them part of our community.
Develop those traditions and be willing to, have a visible role in that in Gainesville, and to be courageous and not so embarrassed about, not so shy about what we do, for our connection with God.